Hi, everybody. I'm artist Micah Goguen, and maybe you're just getting started with watercolors, or maybe you've been at it for a while, and mixing colors is something that still frustrates you. Well, in this short video, I'll be able to walk you through how to create swatches of your color palette and how to use gradients to get different levels of color and saturation. We'll be using the QoR Introductory set, which is a double primary color palette set. And I'll be including as a free complimentary gift a PDF of how to mix 24 popular recipes and colors. So all of that will be included in a short tutorial. If you'd like to learn more about paper surfaces or brush techniques, or even how wet or dry to work the paper, then check out some of the other modules as well. Hi, in this video we're going to be talking about color mixing, specifically using the QoR 6 Introductory Watercolor set. QoR, if you're unfamiliar, is a division of Golden Artist Colors, and what makes it unique is that it has its own special binder called Arbizol. Arbizol allows it to hold more pigment than gum arabic, which is traditionally used in watercolors, making the colors more intense and vibrant. In this introductory set, you basically have a double primary palette, including 2 reds, 2 blues, and 2 yellows. And with the PDF attachment that I've created, you'll be able to use those recipes to formulate about 24 basic colors just to get into the ballpark of color mixing so that you can get started. Now, we'll talk about some options and substitutions, but again, for the value and the price point, this color set is an easy addition, and it makes it generally quick and simple to get started. For the yellows, there is a Hansa yellow light, and then there's also a burnt sienna, which, while it's not a yellow, it's still a darker warm, so you still have an aspect of a light and a dark of each of those warm colors. Then you have the Pyrolle Red Light and the Alizarin Crimson. That's going to be your lighter and darker of your red family. And then there is the Ultramarine and the Phthalo Blue, giving you 2 varieties of blue as well. Now in this 6 introductory color set, these swatches were just done on standard 140-pound cold press watercolor paper, and you can watch the video on substrates as well as brushes to get some more foundational information. But it's always good to do a color swatch of your colors following the 30-60-90 rule, meaning that when it's 30%, it's 30% pigment and 70% water. When it's 60%, it's 60% pigment and 40% water. And when it's 90%, it's 90% pigment and 10% water. And then, of course, all the ranges in between. But this just gives us a general idea of the staining power and the tinting strength of each color, as well as granulation, which is not really something we'll dive into with this video, but definitely something to consider. So for the price point and convenience, this kit gives you the best way to start as far as color mixing. Although I do want to talk about some substitutions, because perhaps you'd rather just create your own set. Now my preference in color mixing is to actually take either a raw sienna or a yellow ochre. You see that they're both very similar in color, and to actually substitute that for the burnt sienna. I also prefer to use a quinacridone magenta instead of the alizarin crimson. So this is actually my preferred palette, having the Hansa yellow light, the yellow ochre or raw sienna, the Pyrolle Red Light, the quinacridone magenta, the ultramarine, and the phthalo. But I'm going to show you how you can combine sets, because ultimately you can always work with what you have and pull out a variety of colors. Because it's not about getting it done perfectly, it's just about getting started. And sometimes we need convenience, and sometimes we need accuracy. Now, there are also what I call crutch colors, and crutch colors are going to be the colors that can be mixed, but sometimes it's just more convenient to have a tube. And those typically include, for me, the sap green, the Payne's gray, and the raw umber or burnt umber, whatever your preference is. One's cooler and one's warmer, but this in case is the raw umber. And also dioxazine purple, which is a little bit of a mouthful, but I have a blank card here, and I just want to show you, using the dioxazine, how to create your own tinted value card. So I've already placed my colors out in a travel palette here. I like to do that for convenience. Then I have a little mixing surface. And I'm going to be focusing on the dioxazine purple, which is a nice crutch color. And in all cases, when I'm wetting my brush, I want to keep a sponged paper towel nearby so that I can absorb the colors. The idea is to get most of the color on your paper towel and not in your water. And so I'm just going to start by activating this color with a little bit of water. You can see how rich and dark it is. And I'm going to start with my deepest tone and go ahead and put a color swatch there. And as I moisten the rest of the paper, I'm just going to let the water carry up. I'm not really worried about containment in the boxes. I'm just worried about getting a light stain all the way up on the paper so that I have a pretty full range. Now as this begins to soak in, you can always take color back off or add it back in, but I'm just going to be able to bleed in some of my darker tones here so that I can get more pigment toward the end to show how deep and dark the color can be. And then I'll let that gradient form all the way up to the top of the watercolor. So I'm just going to swipe off some of these to keep them lighter. Blot off on my paper towel there. And then as this color starts to bleed, and once it soaks in, I'll go ahead and apply some deeper layers. So see, I'm just putting glaze layers atop, letting it get slightly lighter as it moves up. Okay, so once this soaks, then I'll adjust a little bit more. You can also use blotting methods to pull color back off. So if you feel like a color has gotten too deep, you can just kind of pat it and soak it back up to a lighter version of it so that you get a better range going on. So I'm going to set this guy aside so that it can dry. And I'm going to just kind of clean up my residue here. And we'll focus on some color mixing recipes. Now, if you are buying individual colors and you would like to get some of the replacements or crutch colors, that's all fine and dandy. Now, obviously with the burnt sienna, which comes in this kit, you can see the difference between that, the raw sienna, and the yellow ochre. So the yellow ochre has a slightly higher stain to it, and when you even consider that among the yellow as well, then you have a little bit more variety as far as what the colors can do. So within a color mixing, if we were to take a sample swatch here, you could basically take the burnt sienna and the yellow. So we'll just remove these two for now because these are the two that come in the introductory QoR set kit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and do equal parts of the burnt sienna and the Hansa yellow light. And what I get is a color really comparable to the yellow ochre. Now it's all relative on proportions, so feel free to adjust and tweak using a glaze method to get it just where you want it. But using those two colors, I can get something very comparable to the raw sienna or the yellow ochre. So that's why I say you can make do with this set for sure. There just might be a little bit of mixing and ratios with the proportions in order to dial down some of the colors. So if you're wanting to start with more of a warmer ochre, for example, if I am making a true orange, which is one of the first ones listed here, it says 1 part burnt sienna, 1 part Pyrolle Red Light. Now, because I'm using the burnt sienna, if I were to actually take 1 part burnt sienna, which is already reddish in tone, and I were to apply that, I'm just going to go a little bit more saturated with the color. And then if I were to use 1 part of Pyrolle Light, the red is a high staining color, so at first glance it's like, whoa, that's not true orange, that is a bright red. So then I know that I need to come in and offset it with the additional color, meaning the burnt sienna, okay? Now, if I were working with yellow ochre instead of the burnt sienna, then, or raw sienna, then I would need to go ahead and lighten that color first. So here's my raw sienna base. I'm doing the exact same thing, but this time, before I go into the red, I'm going to lighten it by adding the Hansa yellow, just as we did in this initial swatch. Then I can come in and add my little touch of red for a more vibrant orange. But essentially, the colors are still going to be very similar in nature. So again, as you're learning color mixing, it's easy just to keep it simple with what comes in the kit and begin to get the ballpark of your colors. And then as you feel more comfortable and confident, you can add additional colors into the mixture that may make mixing more easy, or you can just buy them straight from the tube for convenience. So I did put hole punches in these as suggested by another artist friend of mine, and you can actually make a little keep fob that you can keep to swatch. And then I made sure to write the color names on the back so that I could remember what color was what. So that helps out a great deal as well. So let's mix another color on the list. Let's try and do the teal. The teal is going to be 1 part ultramarine, 1 part phthalo, and a 4th part Hansa yellow. So I'm going to take equal parts of my blues, and I'm going to take a little bit of my phthalo here. I'm going to skip a space so that my color bleeds don't get involved. And I'm just wetting my brush here. I'm going to saturate a little bit darker. And then I'm going to take a little bit of my ultramarine for an equal part. And if you have any perfectionistic tendencies, this might be where to let them go, because the parts actually help guide you just for ratio matters. But again, it's all about application and experience. So there's my 1/4 part yellow. And because that went down so strong, I'm going to put another glaze layer of the blues just to get more of the teal that I'm looking for. And if you let the paper dry slightly in between, you get a much better application layer. So just allowing 2 to 3 minutes for the paper to absorb. This is already dry to the touch. Then you can come back and revisit colors with a lot more accuracy. So now let's mix up something dark. A lot of times we're looking for that black and we don't have it. So here for charcoal black, it says 3 parts ultramarine, 1 part burnt sienna, and 1 part Pyrolle Red Light. So 3 to 1 to 1. So I'm going to start off by a heaping helping of my ultramarine. It said 3 parts. So I'm just going to do that here on the last square. And then I'm going to do 1 part of my burnt sienna. Again, knowing that this is wet, a lot of times absorbent brushes will pull the color back off, so it takes just a moment sometimes to let things set. You can already tell how dark that's gotten. I'm going to put another swatch of my ultramarine blue to replace what kind of got sucked off there. And then I'm going to take 1 part of my red and add that in. The red's such a high staining color, I'm like, oh no, that's not black at all. Well, just because I accidentally got too high of a proportion, I'm going to have to offset it by adding my other colors back down. So I'm going to go back down with more blue. And I'm going to go back down with a little bit more of my burnt sienna. Okay, and you get a nice, rich, dark charcoal black without actually having black. Let's take a look at 2 more here. Let's do something perhaps in the purple family. So for the purple, we have 2 options here. Well, actually 3. We have a mulberry, we have a violet, and a purple. So let's go with the purple, which is 1 part crimson and 1 part phthalo. So I'm going to take 1 part of my Alizarin crimson, which is here. And I'm going to make that a little bit richer, just because purple tends to be a deep color. And then I'm going to take a little bit of my phthalo. And again, you see that the water saturation has lightened it. So I'm going to go back down with another layer of color. Notice how I'm holding the brush down parallel rather than, because that will scrape more of it off. So when you're working wet on wet, which isn't always the preferred choice, you can tend to pull things back off of the surface. And so to avoid that, a lot of times you can just spatula it on, but like I said, I'd recommend allowing it to dry in between. And when you're mixing your colors, you want to get an accurate combination, and sometimes it's just a difficult gameplay of, if it looks too red, add a little bit of the opposite color, blue. If it looks too blue, add a little touch of the opposite color, which is the red. And so it's all a matter of knowing the recipe as a guideline, so you at least know which colors are involved, and then it's up to you to decipher the right proportions that give you the color in your mind. See, now I've over-exaggerated it, and it's a little too blue. So what I'm going to choose to do is just go back in with a little bit more of the crimson to tinge it back to a purple. Okay, and if that seems too red to you, you can always go back in with a little bit more blue until you get the right shade of purple that is right for you, which that's looking pretty good. It's a nice deep purple. Now let's do one more. I'm going to do a green, and this time what I'm noticing, let's see, let's do something in the olive family, and I'm seeing an avocado, which is 1 part phthalo and 2 parts burnt sienna. So I'm going to take a little bit of phthalo, and phthalo is a high tinting color. It's very strong and powerful, just like red. And there are several others that are culprits like that as well, so you just need to know that proportion-wise, sometimes you back down off those colors. But there's one layer of the phthalo, and then it's 2 parts of the burnt sienna. Kick that up a notch. And that got a little too warm. I'm looking for green, so I'm just going to offset it with a little bit of my phthalo until I get my version of the avocado. Okay. So now you have a strip of assessments, and then the advanced method would be, as you start to substitute colors, see how changing one color, if I did not use alizarin crimson and I used magenta for say, how much brighter would that purple be? So let's take a look at that. If I were to use magenta instead of crimson with the phthalo, look at how much more intense that color would be versus how dark and muted, which is what we got. So sometimes offsetting one color out of the kit can change the whole color recipe. The same thing with our avocado. If we had used, instead of burnt sienna, if we had been able to use a yellow ochre, how would that offset or change the color to make it a little bit different? So we'll take a quick look at that with another sample piece. Let me move this out of the way. And I'm just going to clean up my residue here. So let's try the same mixtures again. And now I'm going to take the purple that we did, which was phthalo and crimson. It's still an adequate purple, but now I'm going to use phthalo and magenta. Okay, and look at how much more vibrant that color is. Phthalo and magenta. It's a much different purple just by changing the one red. And I could do the same exercise with several reds just to see which one I prefer. And that's how you customize your own palette over time. A lot of times prefabricated factory sets are just done based on their mixing experience and what colors they find to be more useful, which I totally support the colors in this set. But as you grow and evolve, so will your color mixing. So let's take the avocado. That was 2 parts of the burnt sienna and 1 part of the phthalo originally, but now let's switch it up and we'll use 1 part phthalo and we'll use 2 parts of the yellow ochre or raw sienna. Okay, so what you're noticing is the colors are very similar, but it's just a little bit more brightness that makes all the difference. Closer to an avocado skin, although the first one was pretty good to begin with, but it just gives you that subtle difference that may change your whole color preference. But again, in the beginning, we're just trying to learn about mixing and proportions and just kind of getting the values that we're looking for. So I hope that this video was helpful, just getting you started making your own swatches. Whatever your choice is, whether it's the introductory set here, or they even have a 12 set of the core, or the 24 set, which has everything that you ever wanted color-wise. But I find that it's a lot better for me to mix with less in the beginning and to evolve as I start to add colors into my color choices. So when I can kind of figure out how to get in the ballpark of these colors, then I can start making one substitution, one color at a time to see how that change is affected. If you'd like to learn more about how color changes affect the paintings and the choices, you can also see my video on just color choices for this primary color scheme marsh scene and how just changing one of the blues can alter all of the colors around it. And there's several examples there showing you how to substitute colors. So I hope that you found this video helpful. If you would like to learn more about color mixing, watercolor application, or other basic art methods, then you can find me at Micah Goguen Art, or you can search my YouTube channel for more info. Thank you.